It is a fact. Ancient war enemies have signed a treaty to create economic and military policies in common as an alleged continuation of the historic conciliation in 1963 and the opportunity of promoting a European Union that does not satisfy the demands of their people, confronts the Brexit, and has Germany won France for a German agenda or the other way around? Are both partners going back to that alliance after the Second World War? What the European Union will demand hereinafter will run around that axis. What rules include in these agreements that are happening in the European Union that capitalize the discontent of citizens around their authorities? What role does Russia play as mandatory allies? And the United States, the Aachen Treaty, is it a re-impulse of French-Germany agreements? This is our critical move today. Less actions and actors involved.
años.
56 years after the signature of the Hayes Treaty in 1953, Angela Merkel and Macron met in the German city of Macron and signed this agreement. It sets rules for the relations between border rules, the binational assembly, clauses of common defense, working for the presence of Germany in the UN Security Council, and have a European army, among others. The conflicts between France and Germany have put on fire and shed blood around the world. It is our duty to end it. Our common vision should be now that Europe should be the shields for our peoples. I know that it's a painful task, but at the end of this road, there's an infinite enrichment. I would like to commit here on behalf of my government with all my force and heart. What did Merkel and Macron sign in the city of Germany near the Netherlands? We will detail in general in our mapping. The Treaty of Aachen proposes a shared commitment, strong and efficient foreign policy and common security to reinforce and deepen economic ties and currencies, strengthen political cooperation in the areas of foreign policy, defense, and security, improve the ability of independent Europe to take action and adopt common positioning on shared interests. It also coordinates economic and environmental policy, cooperation in judicial intelligence and policing areas, bilateral cooperation against terrorism and organized crime, transportation and infrastructure and policies along borders, research on artificial intelligence and other groundbreaking innovations, common task force for peacemaking operations in other countries. They will create a French-German Council for Defense and Security as a political order that will guide the route, a common parliamentary assembly of 100 lawmakers, a common industry of defense, and a shared policy of weapons exports produced jointly. They will hold annual meetings and quarterly exchanges. The admission of Germany UN Security Council would be a must, and armed forces in Mali, they plan to reinforce their action plans to create a common culture and joint plans. It talks about the joint policy in Africa, regarding the conflict. After this mapping of the Aachen Agreement, we will talk about what Sputnik published on January 25. The concern of Italy because of the French-German terms. First Minister Giuseppe Conte talked to Corriere della Sera on one specific topic. The UN Security Council responds to the architecture whereby the positions entitled to veto left place to the Second World War. Did Germany win or lose? The permanent position should be granted to Europe, and therefore Italy. This is what Italy voted for in 1990. Now we will go to World Socialist website, usws.org. Under the title, Germany and France reinforce police and military forces in said. This was published on January 29 of this year, and among other things, it also details the treaty. It's a warning for the workers of all Europe and beyond. Militarism, austerity, and police state repression of social opposition are not accidents or mistakes committed by heads of state. Rather, the accelerated turn towards a military government is an international move rooted in a decomposition of world capitalism. It can only be combated by uniting the working forces against capitalism around the world. This is said in the end of this broad article published in WSWS. Now, we would like to recommend Telesur TV.net, written by Alfredo Jalife, Mexican analyst.
Además profesor de la UNAM, Angela Merkel y Emmanuel Macron firman el Tratado de Aquisgrán.
Merkel and Macron signed the Aachen Treaty. It calls our attention to the German-French coordination on intelligence, artificial intelligence, and other avant-garde topics. Perhaps it's an avant-garde supersonic concern around Russia. Jalife asks, will the parliament be binational in Europe? Will the national tsunamis approaching in May elections? And concludes Merkel has never concealed his disdain for foreign sovereignties, while Mike Pompeo, former CIA agent, just sentenced the deaths of globalism in Davos. Did the Aachen Agreement arrive too late? We're going to note this question to make it to our analysts. We now add another question. What are the intentions of France and Germany? How did the rest of allies and the U.S. react to this? What do they see in this treaty? An agreed way of obtaining it again? We will have to see. We will ask this to our guests after this pause.
Estamos de regreso.
Tratado de Aquisgrán, Aachen Treaty, French-German supremacy in the European Union, recomposition of the European Union, or supremacy. That is our proposal today. We are going to El Español under the title Macron received storms after asking a European army to defend from China, Russia, and the United States. Just after the Jean Gillette in France last November, President Macron declared to a French radio, Europe should be prepared to confront Russia, China, and/or United States. And Trump, when he learned about this, answered through Twitter as he liked. Very insulting, but perhaps Europe should first play its critical part in NATO that the United States is paying hugely. Well, that was a little before Macron received Trump, by the way, in Paris. Does the German-French coalition aspire to a more independent place in Europe? They have the offensive military and the economic financial with three external variables. Brexit, United States, inter-imperial relations that take place with not many agreements according to what we've seen lately in multilateral agreements. These are our data. In the midst of an uncertain road like the separation of UK from the European Union, capitalistic crisis, and imperialist and transatlantic, as well as U.S. threats, France and Germany has decided to become the leaders with a sheet that is completely unpopular. In spite of the mentions to social rights, it presented the first time by Macron and Merkel during their first encounter on November 19 in Berlin. The first term, an army and an weapons race and common weapons make us think that Germany is interested in remilitarizing its foreign policy. Another point is that joint operations of French-German police will take place not only France and Germany, but also abroad. It's a confirmation of a supremacist axis that will intervene in internal matters of other places of the communitary bloc. They presented a plan to strengthen the euro. Is this reconfiguration of the eurozone? Does this have to do with the exhaustion of the monetary regime or with increasing competitive trust of questioned economies by shortages in key areas for citizenships that pay the mistakes of the authorities or budget insufficiencies? Other questions that come out on this critical move. I would now like to ask the vision of our analyst for this segment. From Germany, Arturo Gal, Mexican political analyst who lives in this country, professor of law in University of Jena, Alemania. Hello, Arturo. I would like to know your impression. Who on who for its agenda? Who will guide the communitary ship? Thank you for the invitation. I would like to talk first about the meaning of the city of Aachen in Germany. It is where the remainders of Charlemagne, the emperor, lie, that divided the empire and started the Sacro-German and French empire. So they're giving a signal of unity by signing this treaty in the city. Now, who wins, who loses, I think it's difficult to place it in black and white. What I do think is that more than a reconfiguration, it's more a solidification of the bloc conducted by Macron and Merkel, but more personalistic by Merkel, who is soon to withdraw from politics. And I think that with this treaty, they seek to solidify this bloc that conducted by Germany and France, and that is obeyed by everybody, Portugal, Greece, Netherlands. And as a prelude that is to come, which is European elections, where, as Dr. Halipe said, certainly it would seem that winds wind of nationalism is coming, as we saw in Hungary, Austria, and Italy. And this is a move to solidify the original basic group of the European Union at portals of this reconfiguration of the European Parliament that will surely present many difficulties to keep the policy, both monetary and foreign affairs and defense, that both leading countries of the Union have followed until now. Now, looking at the text of the treaty, there are three important matters in the military and security. Macron talked about something to defend from new threats, Russia, China, and this proposes a relation between these three powers plus the European Union, borders, and the unit to act to stabilize other countries. This is what is textually read on the treaty. Does this talk about some interference? What can we conclude of this phrase that I think says a lot? Of course, I think it's a door that is being opened to military operations abroad. But this is not new. There's a myth that circulates that says that both Germany and the European Union are a progressive force in the world as compared to the traditional imperialistic United States. But I repeat, this is a myth because since the creation of the Federal Republic of Germany after the Second World War, Germany was fully integrated in the Atlantic defense system created by the United States. And from the beginning, it has been a spear point for any interest abroad, especially in Europe and vis-a-vis Russia, because since Germany united in one, it started negotiations, and Germany since the 90s has had different tasks abroad, military tasks in the Balkans, in the Persian Gulf, that also had a participation. And in 1994, the Supreme Court of Germany rephrased Article 24 to allow military operations abroad. And in fact, if you see this article, paragraph 2, it seems like the tests of the agreement. So for me, this agreement means the independence of a possible military tasks abroad performed by Europe and conducted by Germany and France, as we saw in the case of Mali, where France had an operation outside NATO or in favor of the United States. So now that Donald Trump is in office and is far away from its traditional European allies, Europe plans to have an armed branch that to defend its economic interest vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis United States or China, both in the military and economic arena. We saw how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Westerwelle, was very active in the protests in Ukraine. And if we compare this situation, a French-German foreign affairs minister goes to Wall Street, Ocupa, and would be talking with students, that would be an interference, but it has been done for years there. Now, that could be a myth that Europe could be less aggressive, and it opens the door explicitly to military operations abroad. Where could these battles take place with this new operational armed branch? Well, we have emergency points in Europe, in Crimea, where there's also a problem in the Novorossiya, which is where the European Union pretends to include Ukraine in the European Union and all this Atlantic defense system. Also, the Baltic countries that have been opposed to Russia and have tended to have assistance from the European allies. Of course, Georgia is a recurrent ally, and with the problem with Serbia and Russia. I would say that these would be the main focus that could be found and are active. But also the European Union has its interests in Syria because of the duct that was planned to be built across Syrian territory, and many analysts, including Dr. Halif, it could be the main cause of the Syrian war. So let's not doubt that the European Union plans also to extend its area of influence to other continents. And let's not forget also that the Minister of Defense, Ursula von der Leyen, broke the taboo of exporting weapons to places in conflict when she sent weapons to Kurdistan and Iraq around 3 years ago. So they take firm steps. They are taking off their masks, and they are convinced, and they will continue with the plan of militarizing one sector of the European Union, whatever it costs and whatever time it takes. Now, you are starting to answer our question. More than a recomposition of the European Union is a militarization plan. And besides, a strategy to solidify this French-German bloc with their corresponding satellites. But it would seem there are governments that are not completely in agreement. For example, we read Sputnik with a note of Giuseppe Conte. Italy will not remain silent, signing decisions taken by others. And especially he refers to that point of making Germany have a seat as a permanent member of the Security Council. Yes, definitely. The UE is a union of different partners. Italy has traditionally been a power, is one of the largest economies in the UE, and felt left aside. The same with Great Britain, that is also a superpower that has been felt left aside in Europe, and that both its government and a large part of its population decided to leave. Of course, they're still doing that, but there are other kinds of countries with less strength under Italy, Great Britain, like Portugal, Poland, that use both the NATO for their border interests vis-a-vis other countries, for example, the Baltic countries against Russia, that would be very happy to join under a pan-European umbrella that does not depend on NATO, of course, without resigning NATO, that will also provide it with a nuclear curtain versus the United States. Of course, the UK has been closer to the United States, but some European Union's third category, please, it's just military economic sense, would be more than happy to find under the pan-European umbrella led by Merkel and Macron. Talking about Merkel, I would like to ask the following. This leads us to think in Greece, the experience it has lived in the last years, and the role Germany played openly in the asphyxiation with cuts, and the strong German accent the community project has. So, as of this agreement, what perspectives could sectors like youth, working class, the elder, retired elders, what expectation could these sectors that are vulnerable have in Europe with this leading pair? In this reality, and the governments like Merkel and Macron, and probably Negret and Kamkadenbauer, there is not much to expect from the social side. It would be only to expect more than the same. But this also has a political cause for this neoliberal project, neoconservative project, multinationalistic, and we already saw it in Eastern Europe and they have the citizen vote has been for populist right. But let's not forget that a part of the voters for the European Parliament will give the votes not only to the populistic right, but also perhaps some left-wing, not social democrat left, but more orthodox Marxist left could receive some seats because the center, so-called center, because it's an extreme policy used by Macron and Merkel. So I would not discard the advance of progressive forces, not social democrat, with which we identify with SP, German SP, or PSOE in Spain, which has nothing to do with the left, and not with forces that are traditionally Marxist, working class. So I think the polarization is probable. There are many small parties that are trying to seek for representation in the European Parliament. We're going to see what happens with the traditional parties in France and Germany. It's not only more than the same, but there are stronger neoliberal policies. A book was just published of Alexander Dobry's, an essay. He was the former Minister of Transportation and Digital Restructuring under Merkel, one of the key members of the fraternal party of Merkel, and talked about a conservative revolution. He was proposing a right-wing party, and it's like an oxymoron. And this comes from the German militarization and the tax that Bundeswehr should carry out abroad to combat terrorism more than. And this makes us think about all unresolved problems like migration. I would also like to ask why, in your opinion, in the last months, political movements that are defined as extreme right nationalists but paradoxically anti-European have been so successful. Well, in Germany, the political cost of policies that accept refugees that obey to economic interests and not moral interests of the German and French right-wing parties have passed the cost not only in votes, but the political cost to citizens, but also economic cost, because people have to share with citizens that are not aware of the German culture. There's a clash, conflicts appear, and societies start being stigmatized as racist when they start objecting these policies that are not moral but obey to economic interest of German companies. To give you an example, refugees who arrive to Germany receive monthly fees, a German course, professional instruction, and all this comes from taxes, German taxes, in private firms that finance electoral campaigns, and then when this labor force, overexploited foreign labor force, starts taking positions by pressing native workers, of course, native workers react in a bad way. And Germans are stigmatized as racists, and this has had effect in votes. And this is why these popular right-wing parties have taken the initiative of appropriating this anti-multinationalist, anti-refugee speech. And of course have taken profit, but this is natural to this overexploitation of foreign labor that serves two purposes. First, financial earning of over-exploiting them, paying them less, and a division in the working class. Unfortunately, we lost communication with Arturo. We will try to reestablish it. Our guest was telling us something very important regarding the place chosen to sign this treaty between France and Germany last January 2. The heart of the imperial Europe of Charlemagne, where Germany, Holland, Belgium, and France and Luxembourg unite. 5 of the founding countries of the community model that is so questioned today. And we started naming the Élysée Treaty, that is a background, because it is said that the current treaty completes that historical one that sealed conciliation after the bloody neo-colonial war of France and Algeria. Contexts are completely different, of course. We will continue analyzing. We were unable to connect again with our guest, but we will connect with our second one. A wind of nationalism, a storm of nationalism is approaching. What does that extreme right, nationalistic right-wing argue, which is self-called European and that could win European elections? It is important to question that treaty could be functional to these right-wing sectors to win these elections in May. We will go towards that. We will start contacting our second guest. A small pause and we'll be back. We are back. Aachen Treaty. French-German supremacy is our critical move today. France and Germany renew their bilateral cooperation exactly 56 years after the Élysée Treaty of historic conciliation. But there have been comments in their respective countries, especially of nationalistic extreme right-wing area with presidential and parliamentary interests. This doesn't mean the left has not said anything, but let's see this context and later linked to our guest. The extreme right represented an alternative party for Germany and the Voice of Alice World deems that President Macron has committed Germany in the sense that both have agreed to create a union to transfer and distribute money, which will be a control of German fiscal funds for Germany, and added that French contractors will benefit from the European defense policy. In the case of France, the so-called neo-fascist politicians have said that Macron has betrayed French interests without discussion. Marine Le Pen said that Macron is selling the country and its sovereignty. For Le Pen, the seat in Security Council of the United Nations is very serious, and the weapons also is a matter of concern. Ultimately, they can talk about sharing our seat with Germany and even sharing our nuclear arsenal because they want to increase the arms industry at all costs. Will we have to ask Germany before exporting? The leftists said that this would mean less public services, less public investment, wage cut, and a tax to employees. We now have Tika Fon, international analyst, director of the Catalan Institute for Peace.
Quiero preguntarle primero sobre esto, ¿no?
I would
Que
like
hemos
to
tratado
first
en la pieza
ask
de
you about what
contexto.
we have
¿Podría esa
dealt in the
extrema
context
derecha que
piece.
se
Could
define
the
a sí mismo como
extreme right
nacionalista,
that is
que ha
self-defined as
despertado en cierta
nationalistic,
medida una
that
profunda
has
xenofobia dentro
awakened
del
deep
viejo continente,
xenophobia in the old continent,
capitalizar las críticas, los
capitalize the
cuestionamientos,
critique
digo
and
bien, a este
questioning
tratado de Aquisgrán,
against
al eje
this
franco-alemán, para hacerse de un
treaty
triunfo en las
to
parlamentarias
win the
europeas de mayo
European
próximo?
parliamentary elections next May?
Hombre, la extrema derecha
The new extreme right in the countries of the European Union will interfere in the European country, that's for sure, project. But their influence will be focused on pointing at the migration as a process that is contrary to European development, contrary to the defense of the economy, very similar to Trump. First, the Europeans that don't want migrants, that would be one of the lines. And the other moment when it could affect is that it could bring inside Europe countries that are not as trustful, that are inside the EU as an economic project, but do not believe Europe as a military defensive project. I include the countries of the East that come from the nearest context to Russia, trust much more in the United States and NATO than the European Union itself in terms of defense. And on the other hand, they start fearing that France and Germany could be the two countries that command or mark the European policy. And these right-wing parties represent this opposition. Now, in terms of defense, steps have been taken. In 2018, because in 2019 there have not been any relevant meetings. These are steps that cannot be stepped back. For example, the European Defense Action Plan is operating. That will not stop. And the fishing plan, there has been a discussion on European defense. It could go further on or less ahead, but it won't step back. In December 2018, the European Council adopted the idea to start operating the military capacity of planning and execution that by November 2018 only had a formation function, military missions abroad by the European Union, but with the aim of training military or policemen. But the ministers of foreign affairs and of defense also in 2018 also had important executive capacities in the European Union, and this is a significant step. This is how the General Secretary of NATO showed his concern for that decision, because I think he said something that is quite true. And it's that in the United States, the European Union takes very small steps, but when it takes them, they start building a common defense process. They have set the basis in 2018, and I think that reports of the European Union and the budgets will show 30 million euro devoted to defense. And what will be surely more successful will be all the industrial support to the development of new military capacities, state-of-the-art, like materials, high technologies, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc. I think it's an attempt of unifying or creating a transnational industry inside Europe devoted to defense.
Le pregunto, Tika, ¿cómo es que no fue votado o consultado y no digo a la ciudadanía europea, que ya es mucho decir en el viejo continente, sino al resto de los socios que son
to the
tan
rest of
dispares entre sí
partners,
como lo recordaba
why weren't
Arturo?
they consulted? I'm not talking about the people, but did Merkel and Macron negotiated with this European institutionality that seems to rule everything? Yes, because the quantified military capacity, if we exclude England with Brexit, that is no longer in, because in theory, if nothing changes, they will stop being there on March 29, and UK would stop participating of all the European industry of defense. It would be excluded from European funds, and except for Denmark and Malta, all the countries are continued there. The topic of creating a European army is not as agreed, but France and Macron is promoting this decision of building a Europe that also be a military fort. But Germany has always been more cautious at the time of involving in military projects. That is France, but Germany is eager to promote military capacity, the creation of military equipment, and I think that an industry that can compete with the U.S. industry will be placed. I think in the world scenario, the industrial struggle and the consecution of new weapons, trans-robotic or new materials, will be European Union, United States, Russia, and China. A way of containing Russia, as Dr. Alfredo Jalife said. I would like to go back to the global scenario you introduced, and I ask you, do you have an idea of the relation with the United States when Donald Trump threatens Europe, when one part of Europe conveniently must have good relations with Iran and the Russian Federation, the first declared enemy of Trump, and the second with Russia? We still have to see things. Yes, these topics are very delicate because until now Trump has acted in a very unilateral way without accepting consensus reached worldwide with the Iran nuclearization program. That was not easy, but the United States has broken with this project and has also broken the nuclear weapon agreements it had with Russia. And in the European topic, I think that what the United States pretends is to save money in military troops in Europe, and its interests are eminently going towards the Sea of China, which is the matter to be concerned of, because Iran and Middle East are giving roles to Russia. They're abandoning that land in favor of Russia. And regarding the European Union, everything they ask is that the European contribute more money to NATO and make more investment in military equipment. What Trump doesn't like is that when its decision, Europe said that they should buy less weapons, and they didn't. Trump didn't like it. He didn't like the capacity of planning and military planning, because that could lead to a European army. We still have to see that, but the embryo is created. For the time being, the fact that Trump be harder with Europe and the UK leaving, that impeded military projects in Europe, leaves France, leaves that tenants to France, which is highly improbable. It's not as sure that France continue in the creation of a European army. The smallest countries of the European Union, they fear them also because they live in a Europe where being French or German is very relevant in the economic and military sphere.
Ahora, entre algunos pro-europeos se leen cosas como
some pro-Europeans say something like this: when things have gone well, when Germany has conducted things, I ask myself, how are things back home? We see, for example, Angela Merkel is leaving the political scenario. His party is falling. It is recognized as so in Germany. And Macron, with the crisis inside, with many demonstrations that have been repressed, asking for more equality and better distribution of wealth. Well, in the case they talk about important access. These are the two countries that generate more in the European Union, and their policies are relevant. I think that the important policy that marked Germany and that they imposed in an economic crisis and that prevented a deficit, placed them in a significant role. And at this time, the people are very unhappy with the European policy, and therefore great social service cuts. Shortages, and this in looking at the population in different countries, this unhappiness is being shown. I ask you about our main hypothesis to conclude: recomposition of the European Union or French-German supremacy? I think that the solution will be to have more Europe, but more Europe not only economically until now. What is missing are more social and equitable policies inside the European Union, and quality, because otherwise we will continue having a European Union that has not organized taxes. There are still countries that are, I'm not going to say tax heaven, but almost. And when there are companies that place their seat in countries inside the European Union, and in countries where they will pay few taxes, and there are countries that allow these companies to take out their capitals for tax purposes. And this is not good for all the citizens of the European Union. Therefore, there should be more Europe, fiscal and distributive. Thank you very much, Tika, for connecting with us. Thank you. You must also think that Germany, there are many countries that still fear Germany. Thank you, Tika. We thank Tika Font from Spain, and now we'll go to our conclusions. Balance games, alliances of unequal partners in many senses, political, economic, philosophical, and it seems to continue in this German-French ally. This treaty signed on January 22, the Aachen Treaty is focused on technology, foreign policy, education, culture, and environment. But it especially focuses on the intention of activating neo-colonialist military activities in foreign territories. For some, Germany is the pioneer with its great industry and its way of evading storms, and for others, it is the one that bleeds or led the program since the beginning. In any case, case, they should sign problems, but we will have to see what will happen in next May, where there could be a repolarization and where the new extreme right that is called nationalistic and European could capitalize this unhappiness and have important votes that mark a change of road in the European Union and open the road to new political constellations. This was the Aachen Treaty, Supremacy or Reconfiguration of the European Union. Thank you very much for listening to us.